Your last name was invented by a government clerk, probably someone who never met your family, on some ordinary day, in a ledger, in whatever handwriting he had. And that name, the one you carry like it's part of who you are, the one you'll pass to your kids, the one on your ID, your badge, your profile, is less than 700 years old. That's not a figure of speech. It's not an exaggeration. For most of human existence, 100,000 years, maybe more, people had one name. The last name is new, and the story of how it got here changes everything you think you know about identity. Think about what that actually means. In a village of 200 people, John was enough. Everyone knew which John. Context did the work a last name does today, and it did it better because it was alive, not fixed. When they needed to tell two Johns apart, they used whatever was right in front of them. John the blacksmith, John the son of Peter, John by the river. Not a legal name, not on any document. A description that became a nickname that became how you were known. Inside the only world you lived in. That system worked for millennia. It worked as long as most people were born, lived, and died within a few miles of each other. So what changed? The answer isn't what most people think. Historian James C. Scott, at Yale University, spent decades studying how modern states learn to see the people they govern. His 1998 book, Seeing Like a State, starts from a simple observation. To collect taxes, you need to know who to collect from. That sounds obvious. The consequences aren't. To collect taxes, you need to identify each person without ambiguity. To draft soldiers, you need to know who to call and track who ran. To register land, you need to know who owns it, who inherits it, who sold it. In a village where everyone goes by a first name, the state sees fog. It can't tell one John from another. Can't track who paid, who owes, who died, who disappeared. The last name, according to Scott, was a technology of legibility. It didn't come from the family. It came from the state's need to read the population like a spreadsheet. And here's the detail most histories of names skip over. Last names weren't adopted voluntarily. In much of Europe, they were imposed. Officials would arrive at villages with a blank ledger and start registering. What's your name? John. Where are you from? By the river. John by the river. Write it down. That John by the river became a last name, became Rivers. And 100 years later, John's great-grandchildren were still called Rivers, even if none of them had ever seen one. The last name was born as a location tag, an address the state pinned to you, one you passed down without really knowing why. And that's only half the story, because there's something even deeper here that almost nobody mentions. Before fixed last names, a person's identity wasn't a text string in a document. It was alive, relational. It shifted depending on who was asking. Historian David Herlihy at Brown University spent decades studying medieval European records. What he found: inside the village, you were the blacksmith's son. At the town market, you were the man from that hamlet. In court, you were identified by your trade and your location. You were whoever the people around you knew you to be. There was no fixed identity you carried everywhere. There were versions of you, and all of them were real, inside the context where they existed. Now think about what happened when the state decided it needed just one version. One version that worked anywhere, that didn't need context, that some clerk in another city could read off a page and immediately know who you were. Historian Keith Wrightson at Cambridge documented active resistance from rural English communities to name registration in the 16th century. Why did they resist? It wasn't stubbornness. It was that the identity system they used, oral, contextual, built on people who actually knew you, worked perfectly well within the boundaries of the life they lived. The problem wasn't their names. The problem was that the state needed to see past those boundaries. And here's the part that sounds small but isn't. When the officials did the registering, they chose the criteria. Not you, them. Sometimes they used the trade, Smith, Cooper, Mason, Thatcher. Sometimes the location, Hill, Brooks, Fields, Rivers. Sometimes the father's name, Johnson is John's son. Richardson is Richard's son. Sometimes a physical feature, short, brown, little. Whatever seemed most convenient in that moment to that official on that day. Someone who had never seen you before decided how you'd be known for the rest of history. And it gets stranger. You probably feel like your last name carries something. History, lineage, family continuity. Maybe it does. In the emotional sense, in the sense of memory and belonging. But in the sense of origin, the story is different. Most European and Latin American last names were created by someone outside the family, in a bureaucratic moment, using whatever criteria seemed convenient at the time. And in some cases, it wasn't convenient. It was deliberately degrading. In parts of Central Europe and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, Jewish communities were forced to adopt German surnames in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. Many of those names were chosen by the officials themselves.